believe it or not, 80% of the firm owners walking around are operating at 10% less in profit margin when they're at, $1 million plus in revenue. And that's pretty scary to think about. And, like you sneeze the wrong way and you're out of money, right? Well, hello and welcome to another amazing guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and I am excited to be here. It is another beautiful, amazing day, although it is freezing cold here in New York. We were blessed with so much warm weather, so going so far into the fall that I think we just kind of had it coming. So we just got to deal with it. And I definitely have to crank up the heat in my office because it's a little chilly today. But Carla Titus is our guest. Carla Titus is the founder and CEO of Wealth and Worth Within. She's a finance expert with over 17 years of combined corporate financial planning, analysis, strategy, and online business experience. She provides fractional CFO services and financial consulting to business owners looking to grow their business profitably. Her priorities for her clients are to help them grow profits, have cash in the bank, and pay themselves well so they can build personal wealth. And we had a long conversation in the green room because we're two nerds, hitting it off. We do fractional CFO work here as well at Profit with Law. And, it's always interesting to, have a colleague in the room and to compare notes and talk about, what are the challenges that you're finding and what are your clients going through and how do you solve them and how do you, and what's the structure of your team and all that jazz. So I've enjoyed the conversation already and you guys are just entering it now. So we're going to see if we can recreate some of it for you, but really Carla is going to come and she's going to share her amazing insight and knowledge with us. What I like to do when we start an episode is just kind of introduce our guests. So Carla, just give us the broad strokes of your background. How in the world did you get into this? When did you start your business? And I know you've been perhaps getting more and more exposure into the legal industry. Why legal? What excites you about that space? Just give us a little bit of the background so that our listeners can get to meet you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me here today. I'm excited for our conversation. And yes, we will nerd out, but we'll make sure it's actionable and good takeaways for the listener too. So I'm Carla Titus, the founder and CEO of Wealth and Worth Within. We are a fractional CFO firm. We started about 6 years ago, just trying to help business owners focus on profitability. We find that a lot of them got into business because they love what they do, but not necessarily the money side or the financial side of it. And it becomes complex and hard for them to understand. And we want to make it easy and accessible. So a lot of the work we do, from foundational work like bookkeeping and trust accounting for law firms to CFO services on strategic direction setting and financial management for the company as they grow, is really coming from my background of corporate finance experience and undergrad in finance. My mom is an accountant. I love everything about business, but not the accounting side as much. So I decided to go for finance instead. And lo and behold, I ended up taking accounting classes, right? So that's just part of what comes with the territory. But my background is all corporate finance, and we apply those frameworks and processes and systems now to small businesses that are growing, that really need support, but have not developed yet the skill set for the forward looking side of the business. They're very focused on the present and the past with their accountant or support that they currently have. And they're really missing like the opportunity to really drive and steer their business in the direction they want to go.
Awesome. So, Carla, when we're looking at a business and you're evaluating them as a client, right? So, I mean, you're perhaps going to step in as the CFO to their business. What's the biggest challenge that you're seeing clients facing that they're trying to solve when they come in the door?
So there's a few challenges that we see often with businesses that are trying to grow and scale. One, that they don't have the right support team in place. They're trying to ask, their existing team to step in as a CFO, though they don't have the experience or skill set to do so. So they're not able to see the things and trends that we are identifying. Two, we see that they're not paying themselves well because there is no profit in the business. So we need to solve for that first to make sure that there's room to pay the owner well and make sure that they can hire the team that they need. And the way we do that is we need to grow revenue or we need to decrease costs. Those are the only two ways we can actually generate profit. I like the growing revenue better because then there's just more room for more things for us to spend money on. And then the other one I see often is cash flow. They're just not even paying attention. They're not managing it. And before they know it, they're like, I can't make payroll in 2 weeks. What happened? Where did the money go? They're not paying attention. They're not looking at their numbers and they're not making decisions based on data. So those where the challenges come from. And that's where we step in to help them start to shift the conversation and start to thinking forward on their business so that we can take control of what's happening and start to prioritize which one are we going to solve first.
So I hear you saying that you need to start off by paying attention, right? You got to know there's a problem coming so that you can address the problem, right? But what can people do to solve the problem? Great. Now I know that I'm going to have a cash crunch, but I still need to make payroll, right? So what, how do we help clients get out of that cash poor space into a better place? Like what are the steps to navigate from being, you know, trying to figure out how you're going to cover payroll to approaching payroll with ease and peace of mind, knowing the money's in the bank and you're good.
Yeah, so there's a few ways. So if your financial track record has been good, you actually might be able to access some kind of line of credit or some short-term capital injection to just close the gap for now and then plan to pay that back and over time develop a plan to manage that debt payoff needed. In the meantime, that's buying us time to go make the hard decisions, which is maybe you're overstaffed, maybe you're too top heavy on leadership, maybe you need to reassess what you're paying your people currently on staff and decide what is the right size team that I need for the business. Also thinking through scaling and growing. But sometimes I find that people get ahead of when they need to hire and they're hiring, for what is to come, even though they haven't made those sales yet. The other option is we can increase prices if we can give notice right away and get prices up for maybe new clients or incoming increase. If we can get some prepayments in place for retainers and get those retainers paid up front, we can start drawing from that early as needed. Obviously, make sure you keep your trust accounting in order for all of this to make sure you stay compliant. You can look at ways to create new revenue streams. There might be some things that you've been looking to do that could generate some cash for you sooner than later. But at this point, if you're not making payroll in the next 2 weeks, you have a really hard problem that's not going to go away in the next 6 months. Even if you wish it to go away, it's not just going to magically disappear. It's going to tend to compound and get worse before it gets better unless you solve the root cause of the problem, which might be the overstaffing, overspending that we need to address as part of the hard conversations we need to have to get things back on track. And you won't know what that is until you run the numbers.
Yeah, so it's interesting because the first thing that you mentioned with the cash infusion, um, I'm a big proponent of using the banking system for what it's there for. I have a talk that I do about being the investor in your business and, how much faster you can make things happen if you had the right amount of capital in the bank. But I also, I think that money should only be borrowed for growth. Like I think that, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't borrow money to cover payroll when you're fixing it. But I don't think that we should borrow money to, plug a hole in a sinking ship, right? Like if the underlying root cause problem is not addressed, then the Band-Aid is gonna fall off, right? Like you're gonna borrow money, you're gonna use the money to cover payroll. It'll buy you some time, 2 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, whatever, depending on how much capital you got. And then if you didn't fix the problem, you're back to square one. You need to borrow again. And then you get into this vicious cycle of continuing to try to borrow money. And, you can only get access to so much cheap capital. Then it becomes expensive capital. And then then you're in a real big trap. So if somebody is looking to solve the cash problem, they want to, okay, let me go to the bank and get a line of credit, or let me go and get a loan and, to kind of bridge me through this process. What are the things they need to do to right the ship? Like, how do they change the trajectory of that cash flow so that when they come out the other side of this, they're actually in a better position.
Yeah. So they need to go back and evaluate what they're spending money on. So after you buy the time that you need to take the actions that you need to take, which is again, going back to the hard things you have to do, is understand where's the money going? What are we going to stop spending money on, maybe temporarily, maybe forever, maybe just for right now? And you need to decide how much is that, and is that going to get you back to profit? Because we need to get back to profit in order to be able to pay that debt back and also make payroll 2 weeks from that last payroll cycle, because payroll doesn't just stop because you don't have money. Like, payroll will continue to be a problem. So if you're not also
Payroll
then
should totally
using that
stop.
time that you bought, and maybe payroll can be minimized, right? Maybe you need to let go of some
Right.
people. Like, and this is where you have to decide, is it going to impact my revenue? Because now you're cutting payroll and you're also cutting down your revenue. That is not the path we want you on either, right? But maybe we want to add additional clients to the people you already have to make sure they're at full capacity and fully utilized, because that will help grow revenue and cost won't grow as significantly. So you will have room for profit. But it doesn't stop at borrowing money. Borrowing money is just to get you the time you need to go address the problem you have, which is you need to be more profitable. Maybe it's increasing prices, maybe it's evaluating margins. What are you offering with your services? Can you cut back on the offer and still deliver on the quality of support? Can you change the offer in some way where it reduces the workload needed in order to fulfill the same outcome? You need to go create efficiencies, or you need to cut down on expenses while you're still trying to grow top line revenue to again create that profit space that you need in order to now pay the debt you took on and create a plan for that over time, and also get ahead on what's coming for payroll. And let's not forget, it's not just payroll. Then you have taxes. Then you have this. And by the way, it all happens at once where your cash flow demands grow. And if you don't project out your cash flow demands to know that you're going to have a shortfall in the next 6 weeks, because yeah, you borrowed money, but it only gets you through the next 6 weeks. And then you're going to be back into that problem again. You got 6 weeks to solve the problem.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. And I like so just to summarize, I think that what you shared is perhaps we need to cut some expenses, whether it's lay some people off or stop paying for some things that we're doing, that are not working, to kind of stop the bleeding. Think about whether you can raise prices or stop delivering something that's included in your service, but it's not a must have in your delivery. And then, um, and kind of just reverse the narrative, on the cash flow of the business, so that you're not bleeding cash. You're starting to be cash positive. What does somebody need to monitor to be able to determine that they're cash positive? So many business owners operate the management of their business from their bank account, right? Like, they log in the morning, and if there's money there, they feel rich, and if there's money, if it's negative, they just furiously start moving money in. But clearly, that's not the thing that's going to be a leading indicator to what's coming. It's a false positive when it's positive, because you don't know what's outstanding and hasn't cleared yet, or what's coming up. What should a business owner be looking at to try to figure out where they're at with a cash flow?
Well, they'll start with their profit and loss statement. They're going to look at revenue and they're going to look at expenses and see what the profit of the business is, or the current loss that they're trying to recover from. And they're going to identify what things they're going to reduce cost on, right? Without impacting revenue. Then they're going to go look at their cash flow statement to see how much money is leaving my business every month, and make sure they're stopping things that are not necessary from a cash flow perspective. Just because it's not on your P&L doesn't mean you're not spending it, because it could be a check you wrote that hasn't cashed out yet, and it should be a payables outstanding, because they won't show on your bank account until it hits, and then it's too late. That's why we don't manage our business from the bank account balance, because we don't know what did we commit ahead of time, or it's coming tomorrow that's due that we are going to get surprised by, and the bank balance will not reflect any of that. So you need to have that statement of cash flow, and then one better, they should have their statement of cash flow forecasted for next week and the week after. What are bills that are coming due? So we know ahead of time that is pre-committed. That cash that's sitting in the bank is going to go away to pay that $5,000 bill and that $2,000 bill and this other thing that's coming next, and see, can you maybe cancel that? If there's a contract in place, can you terminate that support if needed ahead of time? Sometimes there's a 30-day clause, right? So get ahead of that so that you're not getting a surprise. And also negotiate and ask if there's anything that you committed to that you could get out of legally and in a good, fair way, to say, hey, we're having a cash crunch. Can we revisit this? Can we pause it? You can always ask. They might say no. There might be a binding contract, but you can always ask. And I find that negotiating some of those things sometimes helps us reduce the expense, get out of it, pause it, delay it. Can I have 30 days to pay you? Those are the kind of conversations we need to be having and the things we need to be looking at. In addition to that, on the front end of your business, you need to understand what is the health through your KPIs. What are some upcoming sales calls you're having? If you don't have any, you need to go get those booked now, because that's going to impact the cash flow 30 days from now when you close a sale or you have a potential prospect that you need to close. Maybe you can fast track your time to that by providing them some kind of benefit to work with you this week or next week, so that you can shorten the time frame. Instead of 30 days to start, now you have a week and a client is converting and they're paying you that retainer, and now you can breathe for a minute. And so it's managing some of the data in your business that's telling you, hey, here's prospect money that could come your way if you went and closed it more actively. So let's push those sales meetings to this week because it's now an emergency and we need to get this closed and done faster than we normally would.
Right. And you got to be careful, because absolutely close a client, get inbound money, in the door. But when you approach a sales conversation from the energy of I need this sale, the person on the other side of that can feel it. So you got to be really careful, the way that
Yes.
you approach those calls, and you kind of need to like reset yourself before you get on it and be like, okay, I know that I need to close the sale in order to cover the bills or whatever, but I need to step into this conversation as if that wasn't the case. And just kind of, you want to make sure that you're approaching that with the right energy into that call, because people pick up on those cues. Like if you sound desperate, they're
Mm-hmm.
not going to want to sign with you, right? And desperation means there's a problem. So you want to make sure that you're approaching it with the right energy. But I do love that, like, you know, new new business in the door is always a solution to the problem. The problem is that business owners operate from that mindset all the time. Like, if I just had one more client, I could do X. And the reality is that you get one more client and you don't do X, right? So it's not the solution always. Usually, I mean, more often than not, it is not the solution. Now, building capacity that you can handle more clients, and then strategically adding more clients, because of that, investing in marketing to bring those clients in, that's a totally different story. But when you're at capacity and you're struggling with cash, and you're like, oh, if I just had one more client, yeah, you're going to sign that client up, and guess what's going to happen next week? You're going to be struggling to keep that client happy because you didn't have the capacity for that client. So we got to be careful about getting into this trap of just one more client's going to solve my problem. But definitely, if you need to get a cash in the door, one of the ways to do that is bring a client in. Another thing that I think a lot of business owners are really poor at is properly invoicing their clients, right? Like, getting yourself to a place where the you're generating the invoices on time, you're asking for the clients to pay it, set up ways to auto pay, and be able to have like, for example, on our tax side of our business and also our fractional CFO side of our business, everything that's like monthly payments, we have pre-signed ACH agreements with our clients. So we're not
Mm-hmm.
waiting for them to process
Yeah,
an invoice payment. We go in on the first of the month and we process all the payments,
exactly.
and we collect the money, and we know that we've got that cash in the door. um, you know Set yourself up in that way. Lawyers specifically, especially if you're doing hourly billing, are notoriously poor at being able to collect all the dollars that they bill. And I'm not judging anybody because of this, or we just did a whole 3-hour workshop just on billing practices and collection practices and being able to decrease your AR and increase your your how quickly you're able to collect on
Hmm.
money. um but that's something that you might want to start monitoring. Like, how long does it take us to collect money from when the work is done until the money's in the door? And can we shorten that? And one of the ways you can shorten that is bill more frequently. If you're doing hourly
Hmm.
billing, instead of billing once a month, bill once a week. And if that sounds too cumbersome, try it. See what happens. Because what's going to happen is up until now, you're carrying all the expenses for the entire month for that month, and then for the couple of weeks into the next month, because you first invoiced your clients the beginning of the month, and then some of them are taking their sweet time, 1-2 weeks into the month easily to pay that invoice. If you bill it weekly, that money's coming in throughout the month. That itself can make a big difference.
Yeah, making sure your days outstandings get shorter, invoicing more frequently, and following up. I think that's the one that people forget about. Just one invoice is not enough. Sometimes you need to send 2, 3 emails to just get the client to react and make that payment. There maybe should be some penalties if they delay payment, so that way they're motivated to pay on time. Maybe there's a way that you can pre-bill a portion of the hours up front just to get that cash in the door, assuming, the work would take a lot more of those hours, and then get them to agree to a prepaid set of hours that you use as you go. That could be an option to also help cash flow temporarily. And with every agreement, we want to evaluate, right? If the client's taking too long, add those, penalty fees and see if you can help enforce some of that payment coming in on time. But auto billing is definitely the way to go if we're possible. If you can have some card on file, you just send them a notification of what their billed hours are and the amount, and then you can just withdraw. That would be great. It makes the process a lot easier. So you're not waiting on a credit card payment or the client to take action because they're busy. They just want the support. They want this done. They want the help that they need, and they're happy to pay for that support.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked about cash being an issue, right? So one of the problems that you see when clients come in the door is maybe they're struggling to make payroll, right? I mean, that's like payroll and rent are the two big nuts, for every business, unless you're running a virtual business, right? So then you're lucky enough to not have rent, but cash flow is one challenge. What's another challenge that you see your clients have when they're coming in the door, and you know and you're trying to help them?
They're not as profitable as they should be. And
Okay.
that goes back to, some of the pricing maybe that they set up on their own. Nobody helped them guide them. What is the pricing strategy? What is the structure for their services and offers? How has that changed over time? Did they increase their prices because of inflation or whatever? They're maybe delivering more value now and they have a better process because they learn from their experience on working with others. And they're not adjusted their price to indicate that years of experience or expertise that they have now, coming out of several, supporting several clients, and not looking at their gross margins essentially, right? What does it take to deliver on our services based on the people we're paying? And that goes back to, the payroll conversation, making sure those margins are healthy after we cover the expenses of having other attorneys on staff, but also having the right pricing structure in place to make sure that there is room for profit. And I see this often where they're just priced so low or not high enough, or are delivering the world for like nothing. And
Right.
they realize that they can't afford to hire anyone or pay for anything because they just didn't price correctly.
Yeah, so let's talk about profit for a moment. What do you see the margin? What's considered healthy? Like, if somebody, uh, I guess let me first define margin for our audience. So basically, us financial nerds like to think of your profit as a percentage, because if I told you I was making $300,000, you would say, "Wow, that's incredible." But if I told you I was doing that on 30 million in revenue, you would say, "Whoa, wait a second. That's all you can make on 30 million, right?" So
Yeah.
as a percentage, right? As a percentage, 300,000 of 30 million is 1%, which means that my profit margin is 1%. Now, that's not good. Okay, that's bad. But if you're making 500,000 in revenue and you have $300,000, then your margin is more than 50%, right? Closer to it's 60% actually. Um, so that could be really healthy. So, speaking in percentages, Carla, what is a healthy profit margin in your opinion? And how does that translate to what you're seeing coming in the door when new clients come in?
Well, definitely context matters, and the size of your firm is going to have a lot to do with what profit you can hit. In the earlier stages, when it's maybe just you or just you and a paralegal or one other attorney, you probably can easily hit 30-40% profitability in your business. As you scale, what you'll find is it just takes more money to grow the business. There's more resources allocated back, and part of that profit is actually going back to accelerate the growth in your business. And so you will start to see a shift over time as you bring attorney number three, number four, and that profit might actually be reduced as you're investing in marketing and growth down to somewhere between 10 and 20%. And you might say, oh my God, that sucks. Why would I want to do that? Well, the point is that your higher number, which is your revenue, that is the percentage of, it's actually larger. So over time, that absolute number result 10, 20%, maybe up to 28% I've seen with, multiple millions of dollars size of firm, then it becomes a higher absolute number, which is what you want to be looking for, is comparing apples to apples, but also that percentage staying steady over time while you scale. We tend to aim between 10 and 15% while scaling because we know it takes a lot of those resources to be able to drive that growth, and invest in it in the right activities in the right areas for return on investment ROI is going to be key to make sure that revenue results are actually showing up for the investment that you're making on that growth. Often we see people are just spending money, not getting the growth, and now their profit is break even or 1%, like you mentioned. And that is just the worst case scenario because that means everything you're invested in did not work. So you need to try something else. It's time to shift after, you give it a good hard try. It's time to create some new strategies to figure out what could move the needle.
Yeah, and just to kind of put some example on those metrics. So if you're running a solo practice, 500,000 in revenue, and you're at a 50% margin, for example, which is entirely possible when you're a solo, you'd be making 250,000 off of that 500,000 in revenue. Now, if you were to scale that to 2 million and your margin were to go down to 20% in Carla's example, right? 20% of 2 million is 400,000. So your income would have gone up from 250 to 400, even though your margin had come down, which is what Carla was articulating with, that the top line revenue number is going to increase. And therefore that, even though it's a lower percentage, you're still resulting in a better result for you personally. Um, I will say that in our experience, when clients come through the door, typically 3 million plus in revenue, typically they're running at 10% or less in margin. But we've been able to get them to in the 20 to 30% range. And the thing that I want our listeners to think about is, nobody talks about the tax effect, right? Um, but the reality is that when you're earning, upwards of 600,000 a year, your tax, it's 50%. I mean, it's 37% federal. And then if you live in a state, like I live in New York, and New York's taking, 8, 9%. California, 8, 9%. Okay, maybe you live in Florida and for you it's less, right? But your tax hit, you got to figure you're going to be at 50%. So if your margin is 20%, well, 10% of that's going to the government. So your take home after tax is really only 10% of the business. So we always want to think about our after tax effect of the business. And if we can do a better job of unlocking that higher percentage, the higher profit margin, and Carla, she shared one of the three levers that you can use, which is to increase your prices. But it's not the only lever. So if we think about it, what goes into the actual profit we make is we have revenue that comes in the door. So the revenue is one piece of it. And then we have expenses that go out the door. And the margin is what's left, right? The profit's what's left. And I'm a profit first professional. So in just being fair to the profit first world, if you're familiar with it, it's profit minus expenses equals revenue, right? Like, or profit plus expenses, right? You want to take your profit first. So, but in that scenario, if profit is on one side of the equation and revenue and expenses are on the other side, then we have two different ways that we can fix this. We can increase revenue, which Carla said was, raise prices. That's one way to increase revenue. Another way is to bring in more clients, right? So there's two levers that you can pull on the revenue side. And then there's the expense side. We can decrease expenses. So decreasing expenses doesn't necessarily mean that we're cutting costs, that we're letting go of people. It could mean that we're finding more efficient ways to do more work with the same expenses we already have. So if we're increasing the top line, we're increasing the revenue because we're bringing on more clients. If we can find a way to do that without increasing the expenses, that's also going to move the needle on that percentage. So I think there's a huge opportunity for us to look at our business as a whole and say, can we do this more efficiently? Can we do this better? Can we have lower cost people doing things? Can we automate things with technology? Can we systemize and processize things? Can we focus on one specific area up within the practice area so that everything we're doing is pretty much cookie cutter and we're doing the same thing over and over again instead of every client being a totally new thing for us to figure out? So there's a lot of things that we can do within the realm of the operations of the business that can move the needle on the profitability, and really honing in on where the problem lies is probably the best work that Carla and I do with our clients.
Exactly. It's evaluating what are things that are blind spots or opportunities to streamline. And I think with new technology and disruption happening with AI, there's a ton of opportunity. And depending on what side of it you are on, I think there will always be a need for professionals and experts managing those tools. But how do you leverage some of that to ease your way through some work and cut maybe the amount of time it took to research something and go down to the thinking part, which is what you get paid for, the value that you bring to your clients on resolving their legal issues. And I think that is an aspect that, we're yet to unlock, and we'll see how people feel about it and start to adopt it. And that will really streamline and help facilitate, maybe automate some of those workflows and processes and chatbots doing some of the work, once you program it and take the time to do it, which it does take time. So let's be honest, right? There will be an investment up front to hopefully on the back end of that gain the efficiency, because you don't have to do it over and over again. You just have to invest that time at the beginning to get it up and running and set up correctly.
So, Carla, the last piece of this conversation is obviously everything that we're talking about requires you to know your numbers, right? You need to be able to know whether you have a sales problem, whether you have a pricing problem, whether you have, it is the issue, I need more revenue coming in, I need more clients in the door, I need, or is it on the expense side? All of that requires us to really understand our numbers, understand what's possible, make some assumptions and projections, and be able to look forward into the future and say, okay, if we did X, it'll result in Y, and if we did Y, it'll result in Z, right? So, what can our listeners do to get access to that information, right? Like, and do you and I have secret sauce that we're working with? Nobody has access to their numbers until they get a fractional CFO in the door, and then magically those numbers appear. Or is this something that somebody listening to the show can say, hey, I'm not ready to go and invest in a fractional CFO, or I'm too small and they don't want to pay attention to
Mhm.
me, whatever the case is. What can they do? Like if you had some advice for them around monitoring their metrics, are there some tools they can use, or things that they can do in their business to start to be smarter about what's happening?
Yeah, so I think a lot of you maybe are managing your books on your own. I definitely think that you should consider outsourcing that to a bookkeeper that can deliver results to you instead of you having to go into QuickBooks, categorize things, and spend all that time that, again, could be billable time for you, doing the work that you actually enjoy and are good at, and leave the accounting or bookkeeping to people who do it for a living day in and out, because they're going to find ways to do it that maybe you're not aware of. trends or ways that we want to track certain things to maximize your tax, deductions at tax time, and not wait until tax time to do it, but keep up with it monthly, not get behind on it, make sure it's done accurately. And then you get to be the second set of eyes to check the work to make sure things look good. And you get to just spend that 5 to 15 minutes reviewing your financial results as a starting point on becoming aware and familiar with your numbers. Now, having accurate records is the foundation of everything we do, both you, Moshe, and I. And I think we can't do it without good records. And I think that's the piece that people miss out, is because they're maybe rushing or they don't have time. They're just trying to put things in the wrong buckets by accident. And they don't have anyone looking out for them saying, this should not be here. Let me, adjust it to make sure it's correct. You want to have that team, the support that is providing you the results that are accurate, that you can make sure that you can fall behind. And at tax time, it's a breeze because you already have done the hard work throughout every single month, and you answer questions and got things in the right place. And without that foundation, everything we talked about today really doesn't happen, because if you have garbage numbers in, we can give you all the advice in the world, but if it's not the right picture for the business because things didn't get categorized correctly, we are going to give you the wrong advice unintentionally, because we're going to think your numbers are accurate and we didn't know your numbers weren't right. Of course, we'll spot check and make sure things look good, but if there's things hiding, right, and nobody has managed to filter that out or correct it, a lot of the advice is not going to help you because the numbers to start with were not accurate. So we're relying on good, clean records, good bookkeeping, that your trust accounting is, handled the right way by professionals and experienced people. And if you haven't considered outsourcing, this is a good opportunity for you to assess if the work you're doing yourself is good ROI for your business, or would you be better off using that time growing the business and scaling and making it more profitable than it is categorizing transactions or reconciling every month.
Besides for the data in QuickBooks and stuff like that, any third party tools that you use with QuickBooks that you'd recommend somebody check out, whether it helps them with planning or helps them with dashboarding or KPIs or anything like that?
For KPIs, we tried some different tools. I would say even us as professionals, we find we get bound by the box that tools put you in. But if it's something that you can just test out and start to play with, there's tools like Fathom, Sift, and some other dashboard type of tools that will do some of that work for you and interpret some of the results and help you understand. From a cash flow perspective, there's a lot of cash flow forecasting tools. Though what we find sometimes the fallback on those is that it doesn't really adjust for reality. So you just have to be careful with what you're looking at, make sure it makes sense for your business, and know how to utilize some of the information you're getting, not just blindly take it and run with it. And then you can some visualization. You can use some of your existing tools like Clio and see what reports and data is providing you that you can just review and start to look at to understand more about your business. And we find that works really well. You can also hire someone from Upwork to create a dashboard for you pretty cheaply. So you don't have to invest a ton of money, but you can start to get more curious about what your numbers are saying. And if visually that makes more sense for you, we always encourage clients to do a visual representation of what's happening in their business, especially if you're not a numbers person. It helps you cut through that, too many rows of numbers and getting overwhelmed by it.
Absolutely. I love that. And thank you for throwing out those tools. Folks, we're going to include all of that in the show notes for this episode. So if you didn't follow or you need to take notes, and we did that for you already. It's in the description of your podcast player. If you don't see it there, you can get it at profitwithlaw.com. Really appreciate you being here, Carla. As we close out the show, I want to give you an opportunity to, number one, share with people how they can connect with you. If something you said resonated with them, they want to learn more about you, where should they go as a next step from this conversation? And number two, what is one parting piece of advice or wisdom that you want to share with our audience?
Yeah, I'll start with a parting piece of advice, and that is let's start by looking at our numbers. I think awareness can bring a lot of the lack of understanding of what's happening in your business just to get started. And if you're afraid to look at your numbers, maybe book a call with someone who can just help walk through them with you so you don't feel like you're alone in this journey. Not that you have to spend a ton of money on someone, but someone who just take the time to explain what's happening in your numbers that might help you make that first step towards becoming aware. Awareness can solve a lot of problems. Even if they don't look great, now you know. Now you can do something about it and make progress towards a plan to solve that profitability issue you might have or that payroll crush crunch coming up. But if you don't know, it's a little bit harder, right? So start there. If you need some support or want to reach out, we do bookkeeping, trust accounting for lawyers and law firms that are growing. You can reach us on our website at wealthworthwithin.com. There's a bookkeeping under services tab that you can fill out an interest form if you're interested in services. And then if you are looking for a CFO and want some support there, you can book a call or follow on our newsletter. We put a ton of educational content for free. We just want business owners to get better at managing their numbers, and knowing is half the battle. So learn a little bit, educate yourself, and then you can take some action and follow us on social media at Wealth Worth Within. We're always putting educational content for free. You can learn a lot on how to manage your money and start to not shy away from it anymore.
Awesome. Carla, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. Folks, if you've been paying attention, you need to just pay attention. We, again, have everything linked up for you in the show notes to this episode. So all you got to do is look at the description of your podcast player and click on those links to check out the resources that we discussed. And of course, if you are interested in getting in touch with Carla, please go and do that. It's really a breath of fresh air to have a like-minded individual here on the show to just kind of, reinforce the stuff that we talk about on a regular basis. But again, if we look at the legal industry, and this is why I started working with lawyers. I got one client that was referred to me through Profit First headquarters, who then referred another, who referred another. Before I knew it, I had 5 law firms working for me. Of those 5 law firms, 4 of them on the outside had a beautiful business. They had multiple attorneys on staff. They had an office that was very presentable when you walked in, a very nice backdrop and a receptionist. And, like you really got that professional vibe and feel. But then behind the scenes, the owner was transferring personal funds to cover payroll and cover rent, really cash poor operations. And when you start looking at that, you start looking under the hood, you're like, how is it possible? How can this be? And the reality is that it's more common than you think. As a matter of fact, that sample set that I had of 4 out of 5 clients that I had at the beginning has proven to be the truth out there. Believe it or not, 80% of the firm owners walking around are operating at 10% less in profit margin when they're at, a million plus in revenue. And that's pretty scary to think about. And, like you sneeze the wrong way and you're out of money, right? So we want to fix that. We want to change the dynamic. We want to change the conversation. We want to change the way that people are operating, and we want to get that. We want to get that resolved for a ton of business owners out there. Carla and myself are out there doing this with our clients, but we can only help so many people, right? There's only so much capacity. So getting behind the microphone here, having a conversation with you, the listener, hoping that you're gonna take some action, do something with it, is really how we're going to change the narrative, and we're hoping to upend the financial aspect of the businesses in the legal industry by doing that. So thank you so much for being here, for listening, and hopefully taking action from this conversation. Folks, we are here every single week with a brand new episode. Tune in again next Thursday, where we'll release another great conversation, and we're just going to continue bringing you rock stars like Carla, who can continue to help enlighten you and teach you new things, and bring new ideas to your attention, so that you're always taking a step in the positive direction in your business. We appreciate you being a listener of the show. Make sure to hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed, and also you can check us out on YouTube if you're listening to this on the audio podcast, or vice versa. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can check out our audio podcast in your favorite podcast player. Profit with Law is the name of the show everywhere. You can go to profitwithlaw.com/YouTube or profitwithlaw.com/podcast to get to the audio or the YouTube version of the show. And once again, thank you for being here. We'll see you next week. Take care.